Hi, I'm Jesse Anthony.
I'm Linda Anthony,
And
and this is our story.
How y'all doing? My name is Jesse Anthony, and I am a miracle from God. And I'm so grateful to be sitting here today to share my story with you. And I pray that somebody gets something out of this and be encouraged. If you remember nothing else I say, remember this. When I always ask, I always say never bad, never bad. When people ask me, Jesse, how you doing? Because there's always somebody going through something worse than me. And I'm so grateful that our God has taken me through this and He's brought me to this point.
So tell us about your story. Where did it all start at?
My story actually started in 2014 when I was doing my lawn service. And I hid it from my wife, my sickness from my wife for a whole year, at least I thought I did. I had got so weak that I couldn't even pick up a weed eater. I didn't know at the time that it was my heart that was about to give out on me. Heart disease and diabetes runs in my family on both sides, mother and father. So for 2 years, I battled with this heart problem for 2 straight years, which took me on a roller coaster ride like I had never been before. I didn't realize how sick I was until January 20th, 2016, when I died in the ambulance in front of my house. I had got to the point I weighed 285 pounds. I was so full of fluid that I couldn't breathe. I couldn't lay down to sleep. If you see me sitting in this chair now, that's how I had to sleep, sitting up, because I could not lay down. I could not be tilted up. I had to sit up in order to sleep. My life was just full of turmoil. But all the while I trusted God and I prayed and I prayed. I said, Lord, please take this from me. Please help me. And the only words I got from Him is, my grace is sufficient for you. And I battled on. So January 20th, 2016, I actually died. Like I said, I died in the ambulance in front of my house. The paperwork I have in my bag behind my head would tell you they worked on me for an hour and 45 minutes. But they couldn't revive me, so they put me on a ventilator. They ventilated me. So the machines were breathing for me. For 72 hours, I was in God's presence, and I was so glorious. It was fearful. It was a fearful experience, because on the first day of my death, God took me to heaven. And I know how heaven looks in all its beauty, all its splendor. And on the second day, God took me to hell and showed me what hell is like. People think when you in hell, you run around burning on fire, but you're not. You're fastened to the ground and you burn constantly from the inside, but you're never consumed. And the Bible says it's gnashing of teeth, and it's a sound like you've never heard before. But on the third day, I was so grateful, because I was so in fear of going through hell. The Spirit of God took me back up, and I saw the new city, Jerusalem, in all its beauty. And a man came down and met me in the air in a white robe, and he spoke to me in a language at first I did not understand. And when I got ready to speak, he told me, he said, shh, it's not yet your time. So my time is now, today. So I'm speaking out today to let more people know. Because everywhere I go, I tell my testimony. Because it's not just for me, but it's to help somebody else, to encourage somebody else. And I'm grateful to God that He brought me this far to tell this story. If you go back to the book of Revelations 21, chapters 21 and 22, it talks about the foundations of heaven, where heaven sits on. How beautiful the stones that holds the foundation of heaven. And when you see these, when you get to heaven and see these colors, it's nothing compared to what we see now. It's so much beautiful, more beautiful than you've ever seen in your life. You've never seen no white as you'll see when you get there. The streets are actually paved with gold. Everything you see is basically paved with gold. There's no sun in the sky. Remember now, there's no sun in the sky. The glory of God shines so bright that it lights up the city, it lights up heaven, that it's never a dark moment in heaven. It's always a glorious time. I battled this sickness from 2014, 2016, all the way to today. I've been going through, I done died, I don't know how many times, and God has restored me. I know last year my heart stopped 5 times when the defibrillator went off and shocked me 5 times. Because every time it go off, it means my heart has stopped. I had forgot all about the thing was in my chest. And then until it went off last year. And I spent 6 months in the hospital last year. I would come home and stay home a day or two, and then back in the hospital I would go. Come home a day or two and stay in the hospital, and back in the hospital I would go. A total of 6 months last year I spent in the hospital. I caught COVID back in January of last year, and they could have killed me, but it didn't. It did not kill me. God didn't allow me to perish at that time. It's not yet my time. It's not yet my time. No matter what I'm going through or what I've been through, it's not yet my time. When my time comes, God will let me know. Right now, I have to let as many people as I can know that heaven is real and hell is real. And hell is not a place you want to go. The whole experience was kind of terrifying, because I have always asked God to give me more of Him. And on that first day, the day that I died, I'm gonna go all the way back until from the time I left here. I told my wife, I said, you have to call the ambulance for me because I need to go to the hospital. She said, can you wait? I said, yeah, I can wait a few minutes. So I said, I need to get a shower. So she helped me get a shower and dressed me. But when I got out of the shower, my feet were so big, it was like I was standing on air because I had swollen up so big with fluid. And I started to cry because I looked at myself, and even to today, it's still kind of emotional for me. So when the ambulance finally got here, I was propped up on the bed because I had to sit up. But I was cracking jokes, like I always do, with my nephew. This is what I looked like on the first day. That's me on the first day. Then the machine is breathing for me because I could not breathe for myself. I could not do anything for myself. I was in a state where I knew I wasn't here. God had taken me. And on the first 3 days, for the first 72 hours, God never spoke to me. He never said anything. He just took me from place to place to place. And when He took me up, when the first day, when I opened my eyes, when my spirit realized where I was in heaven. And I know it is a glorious place. And it's a place that I want to be. And I'm so grateful that He didn't allow me to perish at that time. And I'm thankful for that. But I'm also thankful for a good wife who stood by me through all my sicknesses, through all my ups and downs. She was right there at my side, holding my hand when I felt like I wanted to give up. She never left me, and I'm grateful for that. On that first day, it was very terrifying. I always said I'm not afraid to die. But when death came for me, I was so afraid. I didn't know how things was going to turn out. But it turned out for the glory of God, and I'm grateful for that.
What was that transition into that second day for you, as well as how was that second day for you in terms of being there, how it felt, and just your mind state?
My state of mind at the time was very fearful. If I thought I was fearful when I went to heaven, I was even more afraid when the Spirit took me to hell. The Bible said hell enlarges itself every day. When I first went in, when the Spirit first took me to hell, I could see one end from the other. But as I went through, it's a very dark place. Think of the blackest black you can ever see in your life. But think about this. It's like charcoal. People were like charcoal. They're burning, but they're never consumed. Everything inside you is red and it's on fire, and you're constantly crying out in agony because there's a pain you had never felt before. And I don't want to ever have to feel that pain. It's a smell like you never smelled before. It's constant burning flesh in hell, and it's a very dark place. But when the Spirit brought me out, remember I said now, when hell enlarges itself every day, when the Spirit took me in, I could see one end from the other. But when He brought me out, I couldn't see one end from the other, because hell had enlarged itself just that much.
Take us to that moment, as well as you coming out of, being in that state of being basically dead for 72 hours to you waking up and being in the room and seeing who was in the room with you. Like, take us through that moment.
On the third day, the Spirit of God took me up into the air, and I saw the new city, Jerusalem, a city great, but it's set on a single grain of sand. This is how awesome God is. It's set on a single grain of sand. And when the Spirit took me up, now mind you, God never spoke to me in these 72 hours. God never said a word to me. He never spoke. And when the Spirit took me up, a man came down in a white robe so white, the white I had never seen before. And if I thought I was fearful coming through hell, I was fearful because I have a fear of heights. But I never looked down. And when I saw him, he started speaking to me. And like I said at first, in a language I did not understand. And when I went to speak, he told me, shh, it's not yet your time. And the Spirit brought me back. And when I opened my eyes, now mind you, I died on a Wednesday. God restored me on a Saturday. Saturday, I know it was a Saturday at 12 o'clock because in my room, there was a clock right above the door, and my bed faced the door. And it was 12 o'clock Saturday when the Spirit of God restored me. Nobody was in the room with me, but I felt for that monitor and I pressed it. And the nurse came in, my nurse came in, and they looked. And, he started asking me a bunch of questions, but I could not answer because I still had that thing in my throat. It was breathing for me. And I kept telling them to take it out. They said if we take it out and you can't breathe, we have to put it back. And that moment in that hospital, my wife, after I woke up, about a half an hour after I woke up, my wife came. And she looked and they all saw me. I can't remember exactly who was with her, but when when she came, because she can tell her side of the story. I can't tell her story. She has to tell it herself. She said she sat there beside that bed every day and held my hand and prayed to God that He would restore me. And I thank God I got a praying wife. But when they finally took everything out in that hospital, when they finally took everything out, the breathing tubes and everything, I had a tube in my neck that went down into my heart. This is what I looked like when I came and when they took everything off me. This is what I looked like. When they took everything off me, I couldn't barely talk because I had that thing so far down in my throat for so long. But I was able to speak and give thanks and praise God. Laying there on that bed, I had to learn to walk again because I couldn't walk. I could not walk. The scripture says in Romans 8:1, there is now therefore no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. So when all the sins that I had committed before this everything happened, I believe God wiped everything away. I do believe God wiped everything away. I paid my price. I paid the price for what I did, but I am still paying the price for something I have no idea, and God has not explained it to me yet. But I know it's not about me, but it's about helping somebody else. So every time I go to the hospital, I don't worry about my situation. I walk the halls and I pray every day. The man in the bed beside me actually died in the hospital. The man bed that I took actually died because they was going to ship me out. And my wife, she got so fearful because she didn't know how to get to Chapel Hill. But the man that was in that bed that I had, that I occupied, died just before I got there. So they had room for me. And I'm so grateful for that.
Amen, brother. So I recall you telling me a story about how Pastor came in and you laid hands on him. You want to add that as well?
Now that's the part she has to tell.
Okay.
She has to tell that part because I don't remember nothing.
Okay.
I was not here. I didn't even hear them.
Yeah. You just remember them telling you and expressing that feeling to you when you came to.
Yes.
Okay.
The only voice that I actually heard. Now I heard her every time she prayed. I could hear her. I could hear her praying for me, and I told her that, and she looked at me like to say, "Huh?" I knew she was sitting there and praying for me. And like I said again, I thank God for her. Because I don't know many people that would actually have put up with me. And from that point to this point.
Hi, everybody out there. I'm Linda Anthony. I'm Jesse Anthony's wife. I'm from North Carolina, Baltimore. I'm really from Maryland by way of North Carolina. I moved here in 2000 and I met Jesse and we got married. And great marriage from beginning all the way up to now. But during the time, I think back in 2013, 14, he started getting sick and he was having some diabetes problems, some kidney problems, and then it went into congestive heart failure. And I didn't know what to do. I was, we were back and forth in and out hospital. He was in the hospital more than home. So, during his time of sickness, and I'm gonna just go into that, it stopped a lot of our things that we were doing. We were traveling, had a business of our own, and because of his illness, it stopped him from working and stopped us from really traveling like we used to travel. But through it all, God still got him here for a reason. Back in 2016 is when my husband, well before then, I'm gonna go back before then, we were on School Street and one night he got real sick. And he told me, he said, "Babe," he said, "I'm dying." And I said, "Don't say that, Jesse." He said, "I'm dying, Linda." And so I could smell, he was in the bedroom and I was in the living room and I could smell the poison that was in his system. I could smell it from the bedroom to the living room as he was breathing. And I went in the bedroom and I said, "Jesse," I said, "you smell so bad." He said, "Because I'm dying." And he turned his face to the wall and he started praying. And when the paramedics got there, called paramedics, and when they got there, they could smell the stench that was coming up out of him. And so we got him to the hospital, and that's when we found out about the infection that he had. It started with the kidneys and so forth. 2015 is when he really started going through the heart problems. And in 2016 is when he died. He was here and he was swollen so big and he started crying. And he said he couldn't see his feet. He couldn't see past his stomach. He had swollen so big and his feet was so big. It was so huge. And so I told him, I said to him, I said, "Jesse," I said, he said, "Well, I'm gonna get me a shower." And he got a shower and I said, "Go and get on the bed and I'm gonna get my shower, change my clothes." And so him and Donnie, my nephew Donnie was here with us and they were laughing and joking. And so Donnie called 911 and when they got here, Jesse was all over the place and he had got up and they put him on the stretcher and he was hollering, telling them that he couldn't lay down. They had to set him up. And so he said, "No, let me walk out, let me walk out." And he walked out the door, and he said he started to run because he was frightened. He was afraid because his heart was, it must have been overreacting, and it scared him so bad. So, and the young lady across the street was in her doorway, and he started to run across the street to our neighbor. And so they got him in, and when we got to the hospital, and I got to the hospital with him, it was about 35 to 40 minutes, or maybe a little longer, that I was sitting out there, and they came out and they asked me some questions, and I gave them the answers they needed. And so they went back in, and it was about an hour or more before they came back. And when they came out to get me, I had called then our daughter Jessica, and I called our son Nelson, and they came in. And so when they came in, they let us go in the back. And Nelson went back, and he looked at Jesse, and he said, "Mom," he said, "he's dead." He said, "He's dead, Mom." And I couldn't believe it. So when I looked in the room, Jesse was not responding to anything. And so they talked with me, and it was one of the nurses that came to me, and she said to me, she said, he has a 50-50 chance. It's either 50 he live or 50 he die. And that, it kind of bothered me, it hurt me, you know, the way she spoke and said it. And she eventually apologized. And for 72 hours, he was clinically dead. But for some reason, the doctor would not give up on him. I did not know that my husband was clinically dead until the nurse came to our house, and she said to him, after he came home, she said, "Mr. Anthony," she said, "did you know that you were clinically dead for 72 hours?" And it just took me by surprise. I thought the whole time that he was in a coma. And so my pastor, thank God, if I can call his name, Pastor Marvin Harrell, Pastor Yolanda Harrell, I thank them so much. They were there. It was two of the other pastors from our church and some other members. They were there with me. And we prayed, and Pastor prayed. He laid hands on Jesse. And we were all standing around the bed holding hands and praying. And just out of the blues, it was a light, a big ball of light that went over Jesse's bed and disappeared. And so I opened my eyes, and I was looking around, and and so Pastor was continue praying, and another light, it was as big as a car headlight. It was a big light, and it was behind the bed, and I saw it as it came up and went over the bed and back. It was like a flash, and the light came over him, and one of the pastors said, "Did you see that?" And I said, "Not once, but twice." And so Jesse started moving as if he was running, and we had to put him back on the bed. And so I stayed the hospital the whole time. I wouldn't come home. I just stayed there beside his bed. And a couple of people were saying, "I know God is talking to him. I know God is telling him something." So I had been going through so much for so long, and it was like the more I prayed, the worse things got. It's like the more I prayed, I didn't see a release. I didn't see him getting healed. And so my faith, I had started losing faith. And I started saying, "Well, why am I praying if I don't see anything happening?" And I was sitting beside his bed, and I was almost ready to give up. And I said, "God, show me what is going on." And if no one believed in hearing the voice of God, believe this. As I was sitting there and I was talking to God that evening, the Lord spoke and said to me in a calm voice, He said, "I'm taking him through a valley experience. I didn't understand what he meant by that. But I grabbed my husband's hand and I started praying, and I asked God to forgive me for that faith that I should have had, but it was leaving me. You know, you say you have faith, but do you really have faith when the rubber meets the road? Do you really have that faith that God can do exceedingly abundantly above all you can think, ask, or imagine? So I just asked God to forgive me, and I stayed there, and I watched him go through from day one till 3 days later. God restored him and brought him back to us. That's when my faith really kicked in. My faith really kicked in at that time, that I know there's a God, and I know that he do hear prayers. The effective fervent prayers of the righteous availeth much. And I had some powerful prayer team behind me. I had my pastor and my pastor wife that was standing behind me, and other members of our church. But when your leaders is there to undergird you and stand with you and pray with you and push you through and say, and all Pastor Yolanda say, and Pastor, his word was, Sister Linda, he's gonna be all right. Sister Linda, he's gonna be all right. That was it. And it made me feel a whole lot at ease to know that I knew that he would be all right. And that when he came out, oh my God, when he came out, I think the only thing I could do was just kiss his forehead and thank God, and kiss his forehead and thank God, and rub his head and mess with his beard and just thank God that my husband was back, that he had restored my husband back to me. And that was the greatest time, the joyous time of my life. Just to have my friend. Not only is he my husband, but he's my friend. He's a good father. He's a great grandfather. He loved them grandbabies. And I don't know what I would have done without him. But I thank God for him. And then later on, things started going back downhill to where he had to go, and where his kidneys was the one that was really started giving him a lot of problems. So he had to have some work done on his kidneys. And one day we were at the doctor's, and they had did some work to his kidneys. And so the doctor said to me that, you know, I had to go out, and as he was getting the kidney work done, it was about 2 hours or more. And so when we came back, the doctor said to me, he said, I have some good news and I have some bad news. And I said, okay. I said, give me all the news at one time. And he said to me, we lost him, but we brought him back. And that's when they had gave him anesthesia, and they didn't give him enough. And he said he started feeling all the, when they was working on his kidneys, he felt it. So they had to give him more anesthesia, and they overdid it, and they lost him. But thank God he came back again. God has this, they say a cat has 9 lives, I'm sorry. A cat has 9 lives, my husband has more than that. And I thank God, but it's just God's grace and his mercy that keeps him. And then 2020, we both was in Maryland, and we both caught COVID. And it put a strain on his heart. And he was in the hospital in Baltimore, Mercy Hospital, for 2.5 weeks. And when he came back to North Carolina, is when he had to have this other surgery done on his heart again. That's when they put the LVAS. But in 2019, I want to say July the 5th of 2019, 19, he got the defibrillator pacemaker put in. 2020, he had the LVAS put in. So he got a lot of stuff in his body, but God is still in control of it all. And I just thank God for him. I thank God for him being here. And I just thank God. I thank God for all my prayer warriors, everybody near and far that has prayed for me and my husband. I thank my friends for coming and just being with me in this time, that when you are a caretaker and you go through a lot with your, whether it's your parents, your mate, or whoever, it's a lot of work. It's very strenuous. It's mind boggling. It's body. You know, it's just a lot of work. And even our bodies and mind get tired. There's many days that when my husband don't even see me crying, I am crying because, not for me, but for him. That God will, because I know he wants to be whole again. And I know and I believe in my heart that God is going to restore him. He's going to restore his heart. He's going to be able to do the things that he normally would do if it wasn't for this situation. So I thank God.